Welcome to the Supported Living Property Podcast with your host, me, Lisa Brown, the place to learn about supported living property investing. Hi, Carly and Kirstin. It's great to have you here today.
Hi there. Hi, Lisa.
Hi,
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much for having us.
Oh, it's great. We've got so much to talk about. Do you want to introduce yourselves at the beginning and tell us a little bit about you? Carly, do you want to go first?
Yeah, so my name's Carly Houston. Well, Kirstin will introduce herself in a minute, but we're sisters. Obviously originally from Scotland, as you can tell from the accents, but we're based down on the Sussex coast in Brighton and Hove. And in terms of our kind of property background, we made a decision about 7-8 years ago that we wanted to get into property, and that it was something we wanted to do together and build a business together. Yeah, we both wanted to make a bit of a step change in our lives, and Kirsty wanted to stop commuting to London, and I wanted to get out of the job that I was in, and obviously support our family and stuff. So we made the decision to get into property, to change our lives really, and then it evolved from there. So I can go into that in a bit more detail. Let Kirsty introduce herself first.
Yeah, I'm Kirstin. We are both from Glasgow originally, but we live in the southeast now in Sussex. Carly lives in Brighton, and I'm more in the countryside now. And it was 2013 we made a decision to get into property, as Carly mentioned. I was commuting from Brighton to London at that time, and I was kind of fed up with the commute, and yeah, it just kind of grew from there. I approached Carly and said I think we should start a property business, and we just went from there, and here we are 7-8 years later. That's our full-time job now.
Fantastic. So you're not commuting anymore. You've escaped that commute.
No, I stopped that a long time ago. Thank goodness.
That's good. So tell us a little bit about how you got into supported living, and where that fits in your property business.
So yeah, it was pretty early on in our property journey when we sort of made the decision we wanted to get into property and make that step change in our life, and really sort of honor our values, and get that, the same reason that a lot of people get into property is for that sort of financial freedom and financial security, and be able to spend more time with your family and friends, and that's kind of a lot of what motivated us to get into property. But it was also very early on we wanted to find a way that we could help people at the same time. As we're going to get into property and make money from property, is there any way that we can actually help more disadvantaged people? So we started looking into ways that we might be able to do that right at the beginning of that journey. So we were looking at, well, how can we work with people that are facing homelessness, or people that are on benefits, and then we just really started researching all of that. Got a coach that specialised in that, did some specialist training, and then it just sort of evolved from there. Also, Kirstin's got a background which she can sort of go into in a bit more detail, as an occupational therapist specialising in mental health. Kirstin, want to just sort of give a little bit of background to what you're doing and the demographic of people that you were working with?
Yeah, so I think, like Carly said, I think we knew straight away, it just resonated with us, the type of tenants that we wanted to house and support. So the job that I was doing before we started the property business is I was an occupational therapist, working in mental health, and also I worked in addictions for a while as well. So and that was something I found extremely fulfilling and satisfying and kind of rewarding. So I think kind of going on from there, that I wanted to continue to help that demographic of people. So that was part of it. And also I think just Carly and I, just from a values point of view, it was very instinctive. We just kind of both agreed that was the road we wanted to go down. At that point in time, we were complete novices. We didn't know anything about social housing, how it worked. We just knew that that's kind of what we wanted to do and who we wanted to help. And like Carly said, we just started researching, and it was very, very organic, and it was something that we just learned as we went along, if you like. And we started building relationships with various providers and charities, and that was kind of how it grew from there.
Yeah, so we started off, we started off a little bit different. It sort of evolved, the model, I guess, the business model of the property, of what we actually did with the properties kind of evolved as we went along. And the first sort of few projects we did, as Kirstin said, we sort of contacted local charities and housing providers just to see, and the council and stuff, just kind of like the homeless services, to go like, well, how can we work with these, with this kind of demographic of people. So we started working with a local charity, and our initial model, and we'd sort of looked at different LHA models. People hear you talk about different LHA strategies, and we'd sort of looked at how we could make that work. And we obviously live in an expensive area, so we're trying to work out how we can make it work. And we sort of researched a few different models, and then I'm really into the figures and financial side of things. So I was just trying to get the financial structure in right, as well as what we wanted to do. And then we kind of hit on a sort of financial model that we found worked. And so initially we worked with a charity that actually referred people to us. So the first sort of few properties we did, we managed them ourselves. So we worked with a homeless charity that they supported the tenants into the tenancies, but it was very much the tenancies were with us as the landlords.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So we managed the properties, and we've still got, and there's only 3 of those properties, and we still have those first 3 properties. And most of them actually the same tenants as well, believe it or not, from like six years ago, so we've we've got most in those 6 properties, which is actually, so we've got a very specific kind of HMO strategy, where we provide high quality HMOs, all with en suites, and actually so there's 6 units, and then another 2 or 4 units, so we've got 14 units across those 3 properties. And I think out of that we've still got about 6, 7, 8, about 10 of the original tenants, something like that.
Yeah, 8 to 10 of the
the same tenants have been with us from day one. So that's a good thing about that kind of models, that often those tenants will be long term. Mm-hmm. And then because they refer to us by the charity, they did get that support and were known to the charity.
You weren't providing the support, the charity was providing the support, and you just had the tenancy agreement with the individuals in the properties.
Exactly. So this is not really a supported housing model, and they were just provide the initial support, but probably just for the first 6 months. So this is definitely not necessarily for the faint-hearted, and wouldn't necessarily recommend having a huge number of those that you self-manage, although we know people that do.
Do you think your background, Kirstin, helped you feel less daunted by taking on that tenant group? Do you think that made you feel like you were comfortable managing them as a landlord managing them?
Yeah, definitely. So that I take on that role within the business, like managing those tenants, and the charity that we worked with, who would refer the tenants to us, they were aware that I had a mental health background. So in fact, I would say most of those tenants have some sort of mental health issues. They can manage an independent tenancy. A couple of them have support workers and things like that. So yes, I was a lot more comfortable in dealing with any issues that came up, and not kind of intimidated of, if we had a couple of tenants who had like relapses and things like that. One of them had schizophrenia. So I was used to working with people like that, so it didn't faze me. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that definitely helped.
Yeah, I think it does. And I think a lot of landlords are scared, rightly so, concerned about that and about their own abilities to manage that situation. So that's, I imagine from the charity's point of view, you guys look like great landlords and, a really good prospect to work with. But then your model's evolved, hasn't it, as it's gone on?
Yeah, so we kind of started down that route, which worked really well. And as Kirstin said, she kind of was in charge of managing the tenants, and I was in charge of kind of doing the property and financial side of things, and then the business side of things, and then and the modeling, and then it sort of evolved where we were sort of, I don't know how we first came across the lease model. I think we'd maybe heard about people leasing. So then I was like, okay, how do we, is there any way to make this work? So then we just started contacting local housing charities, housing providers, to see if we could find someone that we could actually lease the properties to, that we could provide a similar service, but lease it, which obviously would mean we wouldn't have to do the management, and then we could maybe scale it up as well. So just lots of research and contacting people, and then we moved to a slightly different location, and we found a provider that did a leasing model, and then actually, but what they hadn't done before is because of the specific model that we'd done with our direct tenants, we sort of took that to them, and we said, well, look, this is the way that this is the way that we've been doing it ourselves. And if we set the properties up in this way, how would that be for you? And they were like, oh, this is great. It's much, because they did do HMOs, but they were saying they're very difficult to manage and all that kind of stuff. But because we kind of slightly self-contained the rooms, so there is communal, it is an HMO, and there is communal space, there's communal kitchen, communal space, but each tenant still has their own individual space as well. So they have their own bathroom, they have like a small kind of snack station area where they have, so from a management point of view, it's much better, because in HMOs, like the two of the biggest management problems in an HMO is people sharing bathrooms and the different cleanliness standards, and people stealing each other's food. So, and that's just in any HMO, it doesn't matter what your demographic of tenants are. So by the model that we've created, it sort of mitigated that. Also that the tenants could socialize a bit, but they're not sort of together all the time and having to be together, which could again cause conflict and management issues. So this organization was like over the moon with the model that we were doing, and because we were like newly refurbishing, so what we were doing was taking property, so again from the financial modeling side of it, with your property investor hat on in terms of adding value and getting the right kind of returns, we were buying properties in poor condition and doing complete back to brick refurbishments. So we're handing over high quality newly refurbished properties, which obviously they were really happy with. So then we did a number of properties for the same organisation, and obviously we were their preferred landlord to work with, because they were used to kind of more getting handed not very nice properties and having to deal with that. So they really loved working with us, and actually they then ended up approaching us because they had really great contacts with the council and stuff in that area, and the council said to them, would you be interested in doing some like emergency accommodation? And they came to us and said, look, we've got this opportunity to do that, but we only really want to do it with you guys, because we know that you're going to deliver a good product. So we've got a couple of units of emergency accommodation with them as well.
On that same model as an HMO, kind of, for those small.
Yeah, exactly. And then obviously they give us the guaranteed rent, and they deal with all the management, but we still have an ongoing regular communication with them.
And how long do the leases typically with that you have on your properties?
So they're 5 year, they've been sort of 5 year leases, but we've obviously renewed them because lots of them are now over 5 years. In fact, we've just renewed all the leases on I think we've got like 7 properties with those guys, and we've just done new 5 year leases on all the properties. And it's not fully repairing, so they are a registered provider, but they're not fully repairing because as you know, there's different ways you can have the leases. So we are responsible for kind of like the fabric of the building, so like the boiler and the electrics and the plumbing. So anything to do with the fabric of the building, that would be our responsibility, but they do all the kind of day-to-day maintenance. And then obviously if there's any tenant damage or whatever, then they would put that back. But from a lease point of view, it's not a big long lease. There is break clauses in it and things like that. So it was really important to us as well, and something I know that you teach in your training, is to make sure that as a property investment, it's still in a good location, and it could revert to just being a standard professional HMO if there was any issues with that. Having said that, the demand is huge, so I think it's unlikely that will happen.
But you never know what's going to happen, do you? There
No,
may be
exactly.
changes in the system, and it may be handed back to you with those break clauses. And like you say, you have to, and that's one of the things that scares me quite a lot about people being excited about this. They find a provider to work with, they get really excited about that, and then they adapt something to make it so bespoke for somebody that potentially it's very, very hard for them to to make that asset work for anything else, and that is always a concern, isn't it? And so what's the charity that you're talking about there when they've taken the lease? What are the kind of tenants who are in the properties, Kirstin? What kind of support needs do they have?
So it's people facing homelessness. So I think they've got quite a big waiting list of people. So kind of similar to the tenants the direct tenants we have. I mean, the interesting thing about this is like we've met some of the tenants because sometimes we've needed to go and visit the property for whatever reason, but generally we don't, because we are not managing that, we don't actually meet the tenants. But the ones we have met, Carly, would you say they're very, very kind of similar?
Yeah.
There's not, it's people who can manage independent tenancies and people that are facing homelessness, and that's generally.
Yeah, so it's sort of low priority. So from the point of view, it's like people that they'll basically never get offered a council house, or because they'll never be high enough up the list, but they are homeless. They may be in temporary accommodation, they might be sofa surfing, or some of them have, obviously a lot of them have been street homeless as well, but because they're kind of single people, that just low priority, but generally a lot of them still do have mental health issues, but maybe past addiction issues, but that particular organisation is probably more low level support, just a kind of low level floating support, but then we have we work with some other charities. So in further into Brighton, we actually work with like a women's charity as well. So we've got a couple of properties with our women's charity. So it's like young women facing homelessness, and for various reasons. So we've got one that's actually women that are ex-offenders, and then another one, I think it's women that are fleeing domestic violence. So and obviously there's usually quite a lot of crossover between them.
Sadly, there is, yeah.
Yeah.
And is that again on that same sort of small self-contained HMO kind of model? Is that the same model that you use for those as well?
Yeah. And so they would probably, I mean, they're a more specific demographic, and they, I think, get more support from that particular organisation. So, and then we've got another model where we work with a health provider and it's people with mental health problems. So some of them coming out from hospital and they don't have accommodation, but that's a different model. That's much more of the kind of supported, where they've got full-time staff in there, and one I think's got 24-hour staffed. The other one's like staffed during the day. So we've got a few different providers that we work with, and we work in slightly different ways with all of them.
And with that, the organisation supporting people with mental health challenges, is that again that same HMO model, that the property perspective you're providing for them, but presumably if they've got staff on site, they need some kind of
So yes.
Office, well, like Carly. So we provide an office. Sorry, we're talking over each other. I'll let you go, Carly.
That's all right. Go on.
So with those ones, we set them up in pretty much exactly the same way in terms of like the self-contained units and the communal space as well. But with those ones, the staff need to have an office. So I guess one of the bedrooms we'd need to have that in mind, that was going to be an office, and then they might require some more additional communal space depending on the tenants that they're, or the residents that they're kind of supporting. So yeah.
And doing it that way gives you that future proofing, doesn't it? So that you've not made it too bespoke in that office. That office can easily be converted back to being a bedroom if you need to do that as a general needs HMO.
Yeah, so as the financial model, and the way that I kind of worked out was that we've kind of set the properties up. So we've got and these projects, we're actually the housing provider as well, which we'll talk about a bit more in terms of our community interest company that we've set up. But it's so from the property investment side, that the property itself is essentially being developed as, so if I just talk about one of them, for example, it's been essentially developed as like a 6-bedroom HMO. Okay, so from a kind of value point of view, from the fact we've taken a standard C3 house and we've converted it into a 6-bedroom HMO, and then so from a refinancing and from a value kind of point of view, it's a 6-bedroom HMO, but we actually only put 4 tenants, so 4 tenants in there, and then we have like they have an office and a kind of meeting room. So the 6 rooms are being utilised, but that's like what, you know, they've got office space and kind of therapy space. So it's but it could easily just be a 6-bedroom HMO if it ever had to revert to that. So it's not been, we've not sort of like done big adaptations that mean that it can only be supported housing. And then we've also got a much bigger one, which is just an amazing property. And again, we've actually got 6 people in there, and that's probably as much as we would go, but because it's so big and the rooms are so big, and then there's a huge lounge area and a big kitchen and the office, and then it just works really well. And then we've got like a big garden in there, so we've you know, we've provided like more stuff for them to be able to do. So one of the projects that we've got, you know, the guys that are in there, another 4-unit one that we've got, there's the guys in there and they're really into gardening, so we've provided them with a load of gardening equipment so that they can do that. And then with the other one, you know, we sort of look at the experiential stuff, you know, so some of them have got autism, and so looking at those, kind of being able to create what's the word's gone out of my head, sensory, yeah, sort of sensory spaces and things like that. So always look to how we can enhance the provision.
Fantastic. When you're talking about that, they say that 6-bed HMO that now has got 4 tenants in, I can hear my property head, oh, I'm only getting rent for 4 rooms. How does that stack as a deal? So how does that tend to work out for you?
Well, because of what you're providing, so if I so basically, because it's it gets the housing benefit, and the council provide enhanced housing benefit for something like that, because it's exempt accommodation, which means that that you can put a budget forward to the council to housing benefit, and they can look at it and say, well, you know, this is a unique property, and they will actually take into consideration that property could, you know, they do look at the market value of that property. So though it's only the reason why you're putting 4 people in is because of those individuals, and because they're individuals that need a lot of support, so they'll give a much higher rate per person in order to have the office, to have the extra space. But they will look at it as in terms of like, the property investor could rent this out as a 6-bedroom HMO, so that has to work from a sort of market value point of view.
So you're generally getting market value for these properties.
Yeah, exactly.
So it works out about that for you guys on the property.
Yeah, exactly.
And now I know that you've said that you've recently set up a CIC, that's a community interest company, isn't it? Do you want to talk a little bit about why you've done that and how that's come about?
Yeah, do you want me to go with that? It came about actually with being in touch with a care provider first, and It's a care provider that I'd kind of spoken to a few years ago that I can't remember how I got in touch with. I might have actually even called them up about, you know, seeing if they were doing the leasing model, but they didn't do leasing, but they were very interested in working with us in some capacity. Now, for whatever reason, it never really happened, but then we sort of got in touch a couple of years later, and they actually approached us and said, we're getting these referrals from the NHS and we want to provide care to these people, but we need a kind of housing provider, and they actually suggested to us, would you consider, we love what you're doing, and with your own properties, would you consider becoming the housing provider and partnering with us to sort of provide the accommodation, and then set up the community interest company to be able to do that. So just looked into all the details of it, and then we decided to do that. So we're essentially the housing provider, and then we sort of contract the care company to provide the support to tenants.
So in that situation, you'll have the tenancy agreements with the people.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So they have the tenancy agreements with us, and then they provide the care package. So it's like kept separate. Yeah.
So it keeps that complete separation between the tenancy and the care, doesn't it? That CQC are keen on that model.
Yes, exactly. Because they obviously didn't want to set up the community interest company because it'd be a bit of a conflict of interest, and so and then it just kind of evolved from there, and then that partnership and the projects that we've done are working really, really well, and the council are really happy with the standard of accommodation and with the standard of care, and so we've done a couple of, these are quite unique sort of pilot schemes in the area. So
for what kind of tenant group are you talking about with these ones?
So there's the couple of them that are like, so it's basically people that have gone into hospital for their mental health issue, but they're ready to come out of hospital, but they're not, they need support, they can't go on to independent living, and so the two of the projects, they could be there really long term, and so it's just providing them support, and then if they do sort of recover and are able to move on, then great, but there's not a kind of limit to how long they can stay there. And because what happens is a lot of the time when people go into hospital, sometimes that there's not enough bed space in the city where they're from, and they get sent out of the city, but then because they've sent out of the city, they're out of area, so they lose their place on the list for accommodation, for housing. So then they're ready to come out of hospital, but they're homeless. So it's like, and they're not high enough on the list to get offered. So it's like there's this crazy. But the only reason why they were out of area is because there was not enough bed space for them. Anyway, so that's kind of nuts, but that's the way that it is. So they obviously need that kind of
really meeting the needs of those individuals by getting those properties created for them. And
exactly. And then we've got another one which is a pilot, and it ended up being funded by the whole coming about with the whole COVID thing last year, and it's more of I've forgotten the name. It's not emergency, but it's basically a stepping stone where for them to come out, but they'll just spend 6 weeks. It's a kind of
like a
transition, transition from them coming out of. It's in sort of partnership with a particular mental health hospital in Brighton, and then they are ready to be released, but into their own, so they'll have their own accommodation, so they're ready to go back into there, but actually we provide the interim, which means that they're much less likely, they just get that 6 weeks of support, and then that just makes them much less likely to have to be readmitted, and obviously I think it saves them a lot of money as well, because they would have kept them in there, and not necessarily
a lot more expensive, isn't it, to have people in hospital.
It's an interesting from so I'm always sort of on the other side now, because as an occupational therapist, and I worked in inpatient, so what would happen, and so I saw this happening from the other side, like patients being released from hospital, but then not being quite ready to manage on their own, and it was so common for people to come back in. So it's really great to be kind of providing something that does minimize the risk of that and gives people a better chance of you know, being able to live in the community and be able to manage an independent tenancy. So it's really satisfying for me to be on that side of things, and it's just working really, really well. And it's, I think, probably out of all of the projects that we've done, I think we're probably the most proud and most I find this to be the most fulfilling. I don't know whether that's just because of my mental health background, but it just works really well. And it was something that we kind of took a risk with because we were used to the leasing model. And it's just like, wow, this is fantastic. We're making a tangible difference to people's lives. We're doing something that's actually really helping make things better.
Completely. So it's so needed, isn't it? Hopefully it's a model will be replicated in other places, you know.
Well, yeah, because they've seen that as a pilot, and we actually ended up, the sort of neighbouring council came and went, can we have one? We want one. So it's like, and it was just it was a kind of temporary contract, and it came about because of COVID, because they were releasing people, but they needed to put them somewhere because of COVID. And then it worked really well. So now they've just approved it for another 12 months of funding. Right. So we've just had that, which is like, mind you, it's like getting blood out of a stone dealing with them. You know, they just can't make a decision. But so that's that's one of the challenges in this kind of work, is the bureaucracy and the red tape and the working with the public sector and all of that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. I think just to say before we get into that bit is about the fact that you don't have to set up a CIC, because quite
no, not at all. No.
Will approach me and say, oh, do I need to be CIC, or do I need to be a charity to be in this, or, you know, and actually if you're just, and you don't have to all have a health background, do you? You know, I think if you're just going to be the landlord and you're leasing your property to a good support provider, a good housing provider, you're just taking on landlord responsibilities. You're not taking on caring responsibilities or anything else. So I think it's something that people are scared of, isn't it, and feel that they need to take
yeah. So the CIC, our CIC, that was just a choice thing, and it's completely separate, and we just made a choice to do that. The CIC doesn't own any property or whatever. So on the other side, and what we were doing before that, we were just landlords that leased our properties to housing providers, and for a very hands-off experience. And you know, and you know, we didn't necessarily know it was going to be so hands-off, because we came to it from our values, if that makes sense. We kind of, you know, and obviously we didn't necessarily take the easy route initially, because we were managing ourselves, and we were prepared to carry on doing that model. But it was just like, we then found the leasing model, if you like, sort of not by accident, but it kind of as an evolution. And then it was like, oh right, well, this is actually amazing. This is like in line with our values, and it's like so much less work. And
it's amazing. It's a very, very easy way to hold property if you've got it set up right, if you've got the right providers, isn't it? It can work really well.
Exactly. And we're not very detailed, so we're not like really that great on the property management and system side of things and all of that. So it was actually perfect for us from a values point of view, but also perfect for us in terms of our personalities. And you know, so we've got over 100 units now in this sector. You know, we're talking about HMO units, and you know, and it doesn't, and it's you know, it's still pretty low input, you know, from us, from a managerial point of view. Yes, we have to deal with some maintenance things, and obviously on the properties we still manage ourselves. Obviously there's tenant stuff we have to deal with, but overall, for having that many units, our time cost and our operational costs are far less than someone that had 100 units of professional HMOs, that even if they've got them with an agent, or if they're self-managing and have people in there, you know, the cost of all advertising all those rooms, you know, because people, you know, and probably that might be a question to talk about cost as well, but you know, because you might get less from a leasing model, but you know, obviously you take into account that you've not got voids and you've got a lot less maintenance, but also take into account the cost of constantly advertising your rooms. So I think that's something that people miss out when they're working out what are their savings going down.
And those little repairs and tweaks between tenants, you know, just that, oh,
exactly.
I really need painting now, or this need, all of those little bits add up to make a big difference, don't they, over a 5-year period if providers take in the property.
Yeah, huge difference. And I think looking back, although, you know, as Carly said, we were prepared to do the original model that and scale that, but that would have been much harder to scale up. And I mean, I can't imagine like having to, you know, having 100 units and having to self-manage. We probably would have had to bring out on, you know, more. We do have people who'd help us, but we would have had to, that would have been an additional cost as well, just managing that. So yeah, it was just an amazing kind of discovery that this was a thing that existed, because we didn't really, you know, we weren't really aware of it.
Yeah, I mean, this is like 7 years ago, you know, 6 years ago, so it wasn't it wasn't as known as it is now, and obviously people are much more interested. And we've got some big properties, you know, we've got a 14 bed, we've got a 10 bed, we've got an 8 bed, you know, we've got several 6 beds, and you know, so they're, you know, I mean, so they're not, you know, they're quite daunting, but because we're doing this, it was a lot less daunting, and then we could you know, really focus on that, the financial side of adding value, and also everything that we've done, it has all been funded with other people's money. So we do like work with investors and joint venture partners. So whilst we've been doing this, we've also had to make sure that our projects give the returns that we need to be able to provide the returns that our investors need. And obviously our investors are really happy that we're doing something that helps people, but of course they still want returns, you know, they still want good returns. So we obviously have to make sure that it meets that sort of criteria as well.
Thank you guys, it's been brilliant. Have you got any advice or tips for property investors? Have you got anything you want to say?
Well, I would say that choose something that resonates with you, you know, like Carly and I just did that kind of instinctively. We chose something that resonated with our own values, something that gave us a clear purpose. A lot of people get into property because as we did as well, because they want financial freedom, they want more choice, you know, and they want to take control of their lives and not be kind of trading their time for money. But a lot of people see it as a means to an end, and it's like the main goal is financial. And I would say if your main goal is just financial, you're going to struggle to stay motivated, and you're going to struggle, you know, to be persistent. So if you choose something that, and it doesn't have to be something altruistic or something that, you know, it just had to be something that's in line with your values and also with what you're passionate about. So if you're really passionate about co-living, then, you know, choose that. If you're really passionate about interior design or providing great service accommodation, but I think it has to come from here, and you're much more likely to succeed, and you're much more likely to stay motivated if you do that. So I would say that's that's a place to start from.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And then with the supported housing, don't just do it purely as a financial decision, you know, because yes, you know, people are attracted to the idea of the leasing and being hands off and stuff like that, and that's great. And obviously we want more good quality supported housing projects, but you've got to be prepared for the fact that there's uncertainty, that you know, it's very difficult to get a full commitment from a provider before you actually buy the property. So you've kind of got to persevere, you've got to be persistent, you've got to really want to do it. You know, and obviously there's obviously not got time to go into it, but there's the whole finance side of things as well. It's not necessarily easy to get finance for these kind of projects and everything. So you've got to be, you know, don't just think of it as the easy hands-off route. You know, do it because it's what you really believe in and that's what you want to do.
Thank you. It's been brilliant chatting to you both. Thanks ever so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks for having us. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.